If you take a look at the history of application delivery in IT, you'll find that there's been a lot of forks in the road. Way back in the earliest days, the way in which we IT professionals would deliver applications to users was, well, by walking around with some kind of media, DVD or CD, or in the earliest of days, even floppy disks. Well, if you're like me and you spend a lot of time sitting in front of people's desktops, whiling away the hours as applications got installed one floppy disk at a time, you can recognize why we in IT have spent a lot of time and investment into creating automated delivery solutions for applications. Our users will argue that receiving their applications, having access to them, is probably the most important thing that we do in IT. Well, over the years, the ways in which those applications have been delivered have grown not only in scope but also in number. We can use automated solutions to deliver applications directly onto desktops. We can use newer technologies like terminal services and what we're here to talk about with Citrix to deliver them using remote control protocols. And so over time, well, the ways in which applications got delivered went from one single, solitary, somewhat mind-melting method to a vast menagerie of options. Well, it's only in recent years that companies like Citrix have recognized that the variety of solutions perhaps could be best managed if they were once again unified into a single solution. And that's what you're seeing here today with Citrix XenDesktop 7. In this version, more so than any version in the past, you will have the option to deliver your applications to users atop servers, atop desktops. You can deliver them as applications. You can deliver them as desktops themselves. There's a whole lot of options from a single unified solution. My name is Greg Shields, and over the next series of nuggets, we're going to spend some time talking about the 1YO 200 and 1YO 300 CCA exams. More importantly, I hope to give you all the information you need to be successful in managing and deploying application and desktop solutions atop the Citrix XenDesktop 7.x platform. Unlike pretty much all of Citrix's previous releases, this is the first time that they've really unified the classic server-based computing world with the more newfangled VDI world. And so for one central console, I can now create VDI environments, I can create server-based computing environments, and deliver applications via whatever mechanisms make sense for the user, for the application, and for the device that we're ultimately sending that to. We've got something like 20 or 20 plus nuggets here that we're going to spend some time with in going through all the steps that you'll need to go through to create this environment and then recognize how to manage it once it's in production. Our goal, why we're here today, is to help develop your skills, to assist you for preparing for, installing, configuring, and doing that ongoing maintenance of a Citrix XenDesktop 7.x infrastructure. Now, from this moment on, you'll hear me use the term XenDesktop 7, but XenDesktop version 7, at least at this point, already has additional versions. I think there's a 7.1 version. There may be additional ones by the time you read this as well. The goal here is to use the 7 infrastructure to help you prepare yourself for the ways in which Citrix intends for you to get applications delivered, the strategies in which you can get those applications delivered. Along the way, we're going to spend some time helping you prepare for those all-important 1YO 200 and 1YO 300 exams. I also hope to spend some time kind of talking to you about my own personal experiences and some of the best practices I've learned over the years in delivering applications with technologies like Citrix. There's a bit of a kind of mind shattering and reconfiguration that has to happen here for you to really truly appreciate how Citrix has created this application delivery infrastructure. And so hopefully over this period of 20 plus nuggets, you'll have an opportunity to kind of rethink your entire approach for how you deliver those applications and why you would deliver them through the different options that will be exposed to you. You may find that there's a couple of these nuggets upcoming that are going to be a little challenging to really understand at first. And so a couple of listen-throughs, it might take a couple of listen-throughs for you to really kind of grasp exactly what it is that Citrix is trying to accomplish here with XenDesktop 7. Now, in this nugget, I want to kind of just kick off things by helping you understand just a bit about the exams themselves. Throughout this series, we're going to focus in on the technology. While we're focusing in on that technology, I want you to also kind of just prepare yourself should you be interested in taking those exams. If you're only interested in learning about the solution, don't sweat it, because this is not an exam prep series by any stretch. But the idea here is to help you gather the knowledge you need to be successful with the exams, while at the same time, well, being successful in delivering that all-important environment that is what your daily job entails. We will, in this nugget, talk about Citrix's version 7 certification and kind of where these exams fit with the certification program in general. We'll talk a bit about the intended audience for the CCA. And if you want to be a CCA, well, these exams are designed for a certain kind of level of experience that you may or may not have at this point. Got a few notes on the exam itself, just some things you should be aware of and where you can go should you want to take it. And then also I want to spend some time talking about the outline that I've set up for this series. Now, in putting together this training course, this series of nuggets, what I wanted to do was implement the technologies in using the path that you might be implementing them yourselves. We'll start out with some of the simpler solutions like XenDesktop 7 atop machine creation services, which is the mechanism by which XenDesktop communicates with your favorite hypervisor. We'll then move into other technologies like provisioning services, which is another approach for delivering the assets that you'll layer your applications on top of. We'll talk a bit about AppV. We'll talk also about NetScaler should you want to extend your application delivery infrastructure out into untrusted zones like the internet. So all of these are aligned up in a very specific order based on, again, how you will probably end up implementing them in your own environment. If taking the exam is your goal, I'll spend a minute just talking about the objectives for the exam and how you might prepare yourselves for that exam, and then give you an idea of how you might construct your own network at home so that you can follow along as we go through all the demonstrations here in this series. I tend to use VMware Workstation as the tool for creating the virtual machines. If you have another virtualization solution you prefer, you're welcome to use it, but VMware Workstation is the one that I'm using here as we're going through all of the demonstrations. Be aware that Citrix has made some fairly interesting changes to their certification path with the release of version 7. And in fact, the entirety of Citrix certification has evolved with this release. In the past, Citrix's certification could vary depending on which of the products or focuses that you were intending on certifying in. There were CCAs and CCEAs and CCIAs and various changes over the years. Well, with this release, Citrix has actually unified their certifications into a single 3-tier structure for all the different focuses. There is an apps and desktops focus, which is the one we'll be talking about in this series. There's also a network focus that focuses more on technologies like NetScaler. But irrespective of which focus you're interested in, there are going to be 3 different levels of certification that you'll have to be aware of. At the lowest level is the Citrix Certified Associate, or the CCA. The actual certification will be the CCA- and then whatever the focus is. So in our case, CCA-AD. Passing the CCA or obtaining the CCA requires passing a single exam. Once you've passed that exam, you then qualify to begin taking the CCP, which is the next level, the CCP-AD. That is also a single exam. And the CCE at the top level is a 3rd exam. So these days, if you want to end up getting the maximum amount of certification that you can, all it takes is 3 exams to get there. Now, what's interesting about how they've kind of updated this exam structure is that they've also aligned the structure to the types of content that you need to prepare for each of the exams and for each of the levels in the tier. Obtaining certification for each tier requires passing, as I said, just that single exam plus any of the exams in all the tiers below. So if you're looking to get a CCE, you got to go all the way to 3. Now, in the case of XenDesktop 7, the exams are going to be 1YO, 200, 300, and 400. What's important to recognize here is the word at the very beginning of the title for each of the exams: managing, deploying, and designing. In creating this new structure, Citrix has now aligned the content that is important to recognize for the exam with the types of actions an individual will need to accomplish with an environment. So what this means is that at the first level, 1YO 200, the types of content that they're going to be testing you on will have to do with managing an existing infrastructure. So dealing with troubleshooting that infrastructure, dealing with managing it in production, operating it, those kinds of tasks. Their expectation is, as an entry-level person or a tier 1 type individual, you will probably be dealing with an infrastructure that exists already. And so testing you against the management topics is appropriate as the first phase of the game. As you increase your level of investment and experience with Citrix's products, you will then go on to actually deploying solutions. And so it is this second exam where we'll talk about many of the deployment tasks. We won't, in this series, But there is also a third exam that talks about the design tasks. So not necessarily clicking the buttons to get XenDesktop implemented, but all the boxes that you'll need to put on paper in order to get it ultimately designed before you ever start clicking those buttons. So those three kind of focuses should be at the forefront of your mind as you focused again on passing that exam. I mentioned also that Citrix has kind of an intended audience for each of these exams. For the 1YO200 exam, the intended audience here are those who manage, maintain, monitor, and troubleshoot XenDesktop 7 solutions, and may hold these following job titles: systems administrators, technical support staff, integrators, Citrix consultants. So again, the 1YO200 exam is designed for just managing an existing infrastructure and dealing with one that is already in production. As you begin to create new infrastructures, the 1YO300 exam focuses on those topics if you're the person who builds, tests, and rolls out such infrastructures. You're an engineer, you're a desktop virtualization consultant, or a partner. Now, also associated with the 300 exam, and again, this content I've just pulled off of Citrix exam prep guide, so there's nothing that should be a surprise here if you've actually downloaded their prep guide. The intended audience also possesses an intermediate level knowledge of app and desktop virtualization technologies and has experience deploying app and desktop virtualization solutions in an enterprise environment. When we're talking about the different delivery mechanisms that XenDesktop supports, be aware that they're really kind of focused on three different use cases, and these are the use cases you'll see down here. The first is XenApp hosted or classic XenApp hosted shared desktops. Same thing here for XenApp hosted applications. I'm delivering applications to users. Or classic XenDesktop VDI type environments. So both the VDI route and the application or PC refresh route are all the ones that we'll be testing against on that 1YO300 exam. Down here also are just a couple of notes. These are again also pulled off of Citrix's enablement guide or prep guide for the exam. The 1YO200 is a 66 question exam written in English with a passing score of 66%, which in my mind seems like really not that many questions, although Citrix is giving you a very gracious 205 minutes to complete that exam. Plenty of time. If you're a non-native English speaker, you can be granted up to 30 minutes for a time extension, and depending on what your situation is, that'll either be automatic or you'll need to apply for it. So plenty of time there for your questions, plenty of time to take your time and really kind of understand what those questions are. As you move to the 300 level exam, the number of questions actually goes down to 57 minutes, but the amount of time goes up to 240 minutes. The passing score is still 66%. The exams are administered through Pearson VUE. There's the website when it comes time to schedule. And be aware that the first exam is going to be $150 US for 1YO200, but $300 for 1YO300. So twice as much if you plan on taking that next step up. Also, I want to talk here just kind of about the outline that we'll be going through together here with this series. I think I mentioned earlier that the whole point of this series is to try to introduce you to the new topics as you would organically introduce them if you were doing this studying on your own. And so we begin with installation. Once you got to get the stuff installed, a process that used to be fraught with danger. These days is actually quite a bit streamlined. You can get a new XenDesktop server up and running in not that much time. And that's a great change from some previous versions. We then go through how to license things and how to create your master images and install that delivery agent. So how to create those basic core golden images that will become the foundation by which all of your applications will get delivered. We'll then create machine groups or machine catalogs and delivery groups. As you'll find out, machine catalogs are collections of machines that share similar behaviors or similar characteristics. Delivery groups then address those machines with the rules for how users will connect up to the resources exposed on those virtual machines or physical machines. We will then configure the Citrix Storefront Store, which is the user's front door to access the applications that you will have available. They will access that front door using the Citrix Receiver client, which you'll need to deploy out to those users, or with this version, you can have users deploy it to themselves even if they don't have administrative privileges. We'll then talk about an interesting edge case called remote PC access. So you can actually use XenDesktop as a mechanism to proxy access for users to their own PCs if they need to access them from outside networks. You can accomplish that by just creating a different set of machine catalogs and delivery groups and delivering those out. We'll then talk about applications and how you can layer technologies like Microsoft App V to stream those applications down onto your assets, server or desktop machines, when it comes time to deliver the applications. We'll talk about Citrix Studio policies, which in this version and in recent versions has become the single source, the single go-to point for configuring the user experience of the environment you've set up. There's lots of Studio policies, and in fact, most of the management has been moved into Studio policies so that they can be delivered either as a policy through Citrix or as a group policy through Active Directory. Now, that nugget number 11, we'll talk about the structure of implementing the policies. But I also have a little bonus nugget here, number 12, that will be a review of the Citrix Studio policies, not with an eye towards how they're implemented, but more of an eye towards why and when they'll be implemented. This one is more the, I guess I can call it the consulting, right? The free consulting hour here. I've spent a lot of time working with Citrix, and over the years, there's just some good ways in which you implement the policies, and I hope to be able to relay to you, well, why you would implement them and in what use cases you might, because there's a whole bunch of them that can make your mind spin as you start to go through them. We'll talk about user profiles and how to implement technologies that can improve user profiles and make them roam around the different assets that you'll make available. Talk about the Citrix Director and how you can enable access to your help desk people so that they can troubleshoot things on your behalf, but in a very limited, controlled sense. Printing in Citrix technologies has always been a nightmare. Well, in this version, printing gets even that much less of a nightmare with some new technologies like the Citrix Printing Services and Citrix Printing Server that I think you'll really appreciate. We will then move into a number of nuggets on provisioning services. And these 4 nuggets here are kind of the backbone of that entire provisioning services infrastructure. You don't have to implement provisioning services, and in many circumstances you won't want to. But if you do intend on delivering these assets, again, servers or desktops, in a way that they can be delivered at the moment that they're needed and be provisioned at the moment that they're booted, well, provisioning services offers an infrastructure to accomplish that. We'll talk about how to install it and prepare for it, and then how to deal with provisioning services vDisks in both private and standard mode, as well as how to manage, or as well as how to update those vDisks when it comes time to apply Windows patches or application changes and so forth. Really interesting technology, one that you'll want to take a look at before you implement, because it has its uses and it also has a few concerns associated. We'll spend just a minute on delegated administration. Citrix is a great model for doing delegated administration with this version, and a mind-numbing nugget on securing external access with NetScaler. You'll also see, at least from a high-level whiteboarding perspective, how to configure high availability for those solutions, and in what places you'll need to incorporate high availability technologies in order to ensure your environment is always available for users. This last nugget is optional. If you plan on implementing your assets on top of the XenServer hypervisor, well, then you can take a look at this last nugget that is a very short introduction in configuring XenServer for XenDesktop. But recall, XenDesktop actually works with all of the major hypervisors, VMware, Hyper-V, and XenServer. So you have options for which of the hypervisors you'll want to choose for hosting your infrastructure. I mentioned that this series focuses on 2 of the 3 exams in the CCA certification tiered structure. And these 2 again, 1YO200, 1YO300. There is an exam prep guide that you can find online. A lot of the information I've talked about here in this nugget is kind of pulled from that prep guide, in some cases pulled directly from the prep guide. That prep guide will give you all of the detailed information to prepare for the exam. It will give you details about the objectives and specifically the types of actions that you'll want to understand if you want to be successful in passing that exam. I've kind of copied just some of the objective percentages here for 200 and 300. About 30% for managing that solution, 15% for maintaining, 21% for monitoring, and 35% for troubleshooting that XenDesktop 7 solution. So you can focus your studies on the types of actions that are most important to be successful with the exam. On the 300, about 1/3 is for installing the technology and just about 2/3 on configuring its technical components. Only a very small 8% there on testing configurations. So if you figure there's some 60-odd questions for 200 and 50-odd questions for 300, you can kind of then take those numbers and multiply them by these percentages to get a feel for what number of questions you'll have that associates with each of these different percentages, each of these major objectives. We will be working with a full network here, a CBT Nuggets network that I encourage you to actually replicate at home. We learn by doing. And by replicating the demonstrations, by replicating all the different actions that you'll see me accomplish here in this series, that will not only get your own XenDesktop infrastructure, but it will also help you understand exactly why we're going through the steps that we are. This network will have a domain controller. We will be working predominantly with a single XenDesktop server XD1. We'll only incorporate XD2 and that almost very last nugget when we talk about high availability. We'll be putting our assets on top of two Xen server machines, XS1 and XS2. And we'll have a server here called AppV that we'll use for deploying AppV applications or hosting AppV applications. All of these will be located in a domain, at least here, that I call company.pri. My domain is in the subnet 192.168.1.0. It's a 24-bit mask on the subnet, so 255.255.255.0. And then I also have another machine out here, my NetScaler virtual machine, that we'll talk about for that one single nugget on NetScaler. Personally, I prefer using VMware Workstation. It's a great solution that I can put right here on my desktop to help you. You can use whatever hypervisor you see fit for deploying out your test infrastructure as you prepare yourself. So again, highly recommend kind of playing along as you see the different demonstrations and things here in this series. I've been working with CBT Nuggets for a very long time, and it is always a joy to get to put together these series. And I look forward over the next series of Nuggets for the opportunity to work with you, share with you, and learn with you about managing and deploying app and desktop solutions atop Citrix XenDesktop version 7.x. Once again, my name is Greg Shields. We're going to have a lot of fun. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.